Hello, today I'm here to share the story of Madani and Dr. Marie with you all. This movie is very interesting and I will highly recommend you also go ahead, go watch, go support because it's definitely not a disappointment. Mary is a perfect estimated German in Vienna. She is a good wife to her husband Alexander and understanding mother to her teenage daughter. She meets Madani, a self-confident woman, and the two basically fall in love with each other. But obviously, there's a lot of chaos that happens before they can actually, basically, just be a couple. But before we get into further details, please don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. So let's do the character breakdown and how they get together, what happens to lead them to get to a point at the finale when they finally have a happy ending. So first and foremost, Doctor, in this case Mary, she is a married woman in the beginning of the movie. She's married and basically she and her husband, they have been together for 20 years. But during their wedding anniversary dinner, you can basically just see that her husband said that, he wants space, he wants to break up more of the story. To make a long story short, that he wants a divorce. Obviously, in this case, Dr. Mary's world was, basically turned upside down because it was a situation that she 100 trillion percent didn't saw coming. So, she was just dealing with emotions. She just had a night to herself where she just decided to drink and just to feel everything because she just realized that 20 years of her life with somebody that she'd been building with, just are out of the window. But prior to her anniversary dinner, you can actually see she actually ends up meeting Fa, who's in this case Madani. So they actually end up meeting because, Madani, she was in a rush, she just left the house of the person who she was hooking up with. So she was in a rush, she was changing clothes in this case in the van, and she accidentally almost hit, in this case, Dr. Mary. But obviously she went out of the car, she apologized, they kind of got into an argument. So that was their first encounter. And then later on, obviously, Dr. Mary, she had her anniversary dinner where in this case she and her husband, or in this case her husband left her. And on the other hand, we have we have Madani, who is Fa. She is a woman, she is an older woman, like I said. She loves her parent, in this case, her mother, so much. She takes care of her mother. But obviously, she never had the courage to actually come out to her mother because her mother is a very conservative person. So she never wanted to destroy the relationship with her mother because, she didn't want, and she never was ready in order to tell her mom that she's a lesbian. So there's a lot of like they kind of have different situations going on. Some more of the story after, you can say Dr. Mary's, in this case, separation happens. She ends up going to a lesbian bar, and that's when she encounters with, in this case, with Madani again, in this case, Fa again, and they actually end up just having a conversation. It was kind of awkward, they didn't get along, and so on and so on. But later on, you can see that that's the moment where everything or the whole situation should start, coming together. At the beginning, we can see that later on they actually end up going to the hospital because Fa, mother, she was in the hospital because her mother keep having this, health issues. So she ends up going to the hospital, and she actually ends up going to the hospital where Mary works. She didn't know it; it was just a coincidence. So later on, the two sisters start, having the situations there. You can see that, Mary was avoiding Fa for reasons, she just couldn't be around Fa. Things were just a little bit awkward for her. That obviously, Fa, she was way more open. She was way more like just cool, relaxed. She didn't really make much of the situations, that was going on because, they still didn't do anything. They just had awkward encounters and conversations, nothing beyond that. But things obviously quickly escalated from that point on. As in this case, Mary made herself available to be, in this case, a doctor to help out, in this case, Far's mother. So one day, they just decided to go out for dinner. And the moment they decided to go out for dinner, there's where things just went from 0 to 100 real quick between the two. They actually end up hooking up. And after they hooked up, it was just a beautiful moment for, in this case, for Dr. Mary because she just felt so bright and enlightened. She just felt a lot of happiness in her heart again. And obviously, her daughter can also see that later on. Her daughter actually ends up finding out that yes, she was involved with a woman. She asked her mother how she felt about it, and her daughter was very supportive towards it. But on the other hand, we have obviously, Fa, whose Madani, she was struggling a little bit, to come forward with the situation. She felt like after they hooked up, in this case, she always has rules, she never sleeps over, she hooks up and she leaves. But this time with Dr. Mary, it was a little bit different. She actually, did things different. She stepped out of her rules, and there's something that she didn't know she would experience, because in her thought, it would, in her mind, it would just be another hook up, but things didn't turn out that way, because later on you can clearly see that things started to get a little bit complicated between the two, not like massively complicated, as Dr. Mary basically just told like Fa, like, I don't want to be your secret. If we're gonna do this, we need to do this all the way. You are grown women. I understand your mother is, she has her way, she comes from a different time, but we both basically grown women, and I'm not gonna be with you if I'm gonna be your secret. And obviously, that moment, you can see that just hearing that words from Mary made her understand, like, yo, if I don't do things correctly, if I don't step out of my comfort zone, and if I don't tell my mom who I am, and, then I will lose this person that I definitely care for, and I have a connection with her that I never had before. So she knew that she had to make changes. She knew that she had basically, to do things differently in order to keep, in this case, Dr. Mary. So that is exactly what she did. She had this very emotional moment with her mother. She sat on the couch with, at her mother's house, and she basically just told her mama, like, hey, I'm a lesbian mom and I love women. And her mom wasn't surprised. Her mom told her, like, hey, I already knew. I was just waiting for you to come to me. Because the one thing that her mother wants is, her mother wants grandkids. Her mother is getting older, and her mother wants her to settle down because she ain't getting any younger. So so because of that pressure that her mother did so throw us her, she thought her mom didn't know, but her mom never like, she always tried to introduce her to men and all of that. It's because there was never really, that's what she did, but she never forced her to be with a man. It's just, she just wanted her daughter to settle down and be happy. So later on, when she came out, her mother was so accepting towards her, towards her. She opened her with open arms, and she even told that she would like, to invite, Mary over for dinner, for them just to chat and have a good time. And that's exactly what, Mary, in this case, Fa end up doing. She end up going to the gay bar where they usually go at, and in this case, they end up having like a conversation, and that's where they have the happy moment. But prior to that, at the beginning of the movie, there's something I forgot to mention. At the beginning of the movie, we can clearly see that, yeah, this is so funny. Before they got together, before they even knew about each other's existence, you can clearly see that in this case, Fa, she actually ends up hooking up and having a situationship with a married woman. And that's not just any married woman. It was, in this case, Dr. Mary's daughter, geography teacher. So she was hooking up with her daughter's geography teacher, in this case, Dr. Mary's daughter's geography teacher. And when she found that out, she was so surprised, because she was like, whoa, I'm going out, or I'm having feelings for my daughter's geography teacher. So it was kind of a lot, but that ended up not being a problem at all, because, they're grown women. And as far as she is concerned, in this case, Fa is a single woman. So, more of the story, they have a happy ending, and the movie is called What a Feeling. It was released in 2024. Highly recommend watching. It's really, really, really good. It's available on HBO Max, depending on your location, and other streaming platforms as well. So let me know your thoughts if you have watched it, and what is your, personal view on it. Me personally, I definitely did enjoy it. Until the next review, and goodbye.